Clobbered civilians, giant trucks on tarmac, broken car windows, street wars between police and civilians, and liberation songs filling the air were the scenes on Nairobi streets on the 7th of July, 1990. Despite not being a national holiday, Sabasaba is definitely a day to be remembered in Kenyan history. In July of 1990, Kenya was still a one-party state under the KANU regime, and a group of youthful politicians dubbed the Clobbered civilians, giant trucks on tarmac, broken car windows, street wars between police and civilians, and liberation songs filling the air were the scenes on Nairobi streets on the 7th of July, 1990. Despite not being a national holiday, Sabasaba is definitely a day to be remembered in Kenyan history. In July of 1990, Kenya was still a one-party state under the KANU regime, and a group of youthful politicians dubbed the Young Turks were determined to change that. The group included Raila Odinga, Paul Mwite, James Orengo, Gitobu Imanyara, Joe Ager, Mukisa Kitui, and Anyang' Nyong'o, among others. They received political backing from senior politicians like Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Masinde Muliro, Philip Gashoka, George Ndenge, and Martin Shikuku in the push for a multi-party state. Following the pressure that culminated from the events of July 7, 1990, KANU allowed the formation of more political parties by repealing Section 2A of the Constitution. This was followed by multi-party elections in 1992. Sabasaba has, however, gone by seemingly unnoticed over the years, and one wonders whether it's a day that will lose its meaning over time, or will Kenya...
The 7th of July, otherwise known here in Kenya as Sabasaba Day. So, why is it called Sabasaba Day? It marks the commemoration of a major pro-democracy demonstration that happened on the 7th of July 1990, where Kenyans marched to the streets demanding for constitutional change to repeal Section 2A of the old constitution, which would allow for multi-party democracy. It was also a reaction out of the desperation of Kenyans who had for long lived under the dictatorship of then President Daniel Arap Moi and a one-party state rule under KANU. Young politicians who were known as the Young Turks, with the support of more experienced politicians, called for a massive rally that was supposed to be held at the Kamukunji grounds on the 7th of July, 1990. But on the days leading up to 7th July, the government of President Moi was not comfortable with the kind of influence the young politicians were having on the country, and they started targeting leaders of the Sabasaba movement. Charles Rubia, Raila Odinga, and Kenneth Matiba were arrested and detained days before Sabasaba. But that did not stop the rally from happening. There was enough anger and frustration among Kenyans to push them to come out and protest against the oppressive regime. So on the 7th of July, they came out. Kenyans took to the streets to push for constitutional reforms, and they were met by armed police who tear-gassed and clobbered them, leaving hundreds if not thousands injured. James Orengo, Paul Muite, and Gitobu Manyara were some of the young politicians who led the protests on Sabasaba Day, and they too were not spared by the police. The impact of the Sabasaba riots became a trigger for the second liberation movement in the 90s, a movement that gave birth to multi-party democracy in Kenya. 31 years later, Sabasaba has never been recognized as a national holiday, but it is still remembered by Kenyans as a day when citizens decided to act against an oppressive regime. It is also a day that many human rights defenders used to call for the end of police brutality, given the kind of violence and brute force that was unleashed on Kenyans who were protesting on the streets on Sabasaba in 1990. It left 21 dead and thousands injured. As generations pass, the memories of Sabasaba become less amplified. But in the history books, the impact of the events of the 7th of July 1990 will always be a major turning point in the history of Kenya's democracy.
au the invaders hawakuja wakachukua mattress zenye zilikuwa zimewekwa around kanisa, wakaanza kuzipile kwa kanisa. Then that's when moto iliasha on one side of kanisa, which was the main entrance. So a few of us ni wenye tulitokea kwa dirisha tukipotea kutoka hapo hivyo kwa kanisa. My mother and my brother walikuwa ndani ya kanisa, and walikuwa ni among the victims that walikufa.
All along we came talking about peace and reconciliation, but still it occurred in 2007. They burnt our stores, they burnt our houses, and now that's how we were evicted. Me, I never came back. In fact, I called my wife on my phone. We had harvested, so I told her to leave the animals in the farm. We never came back to see them again. Up to now, we don't know where they went. So we went to the DO's office. That was the most difficult time we have ever had in our lives. And so the whole of Eldoret Showground, which is about 20 acres, was full of nothing else but tents. When I came here the first time, I could not know where my home was. This place was, I had fenced, there were trees all over, I had a borehole there and a permanent toilet, all of them were brought down. In fact, the only thing that remained here was the borehole. It was like, I don't know where I lived at one time or the other. It was such a traumatizing issue.
Naitwa Shadat Abdullahi, mimi ni mkaaji wa Kibra, Darajani, na mimi ni mmoja wale waliodhulumiwa wakati wa election 2007. Hao watu walikuja kwa nyumba, wakaingia ndani, wakavunja kila kitu kwa nyumba, wakanipata na sister yangu mkubwa. Wameanza kushika my elder sister hapo mbele yangu, wakaanza kumnajisi. Nikiwa naona tu hapo, wamejaribu kuomba for help. Hakuna mtu yote mwenye anaingia kati kuja kusaidia. Kila mtu alikuwa amejifungia, anang'ang'ana na hali yake, ambapo my sister amejaribu kujikinga na wao, akapigwa na kisu, akapoteza fahamu, kisha wakamnajisi hapo mbele yangu. Wakaniambia the same thing yenye happen kwa my mom. Walikuwa nadhani sister yangu ni mamangu, wanataka inihapenia pia. Na wao wenyewe wamekuja tena, wakarudi nyuma, wakaanza kunishika. Nimejaribu kung'ang'ana na wao, nguvu ikaniishia na wakanidunga. Kuna kisu kwa alama hapa kwa mguu, wakanidunga na kisu kwa alama, bado niko na alama mpaka saizi hapa. Then niko na damu ikitoka, niko na uoga. The same thing wakanifanyia tu hivyo, wakaninajisi pia mimi mwenyewe. Baada hapo hospitali nikajipata, nikiwa tu hospitali nikipata matibabu. Nikakuja nikapata ripoti kwamba sister yangu mwenye alikuwa niko naye hapa Nairobi kwamba ameaga dunia, na sijapata nafasi ya kumzika. Na masomo yangu imeishia hiyo wakati 2007, ndoto yangu imezimia hiyo wakati ya 2007. Ndo nashukuru Mungu sana, ofisi ya Grace Agenda ikakuja ikaingia kati, kanichukua kama mtoto yao, wanabaki wakinisaidia, wakinitembelea. So maisha yangu imekuwa tu imeharibika tu wakati ya siasa 2007.
In our area kuna mahali during that time ilibandikwa jina inaitwa Othaya area na Nyanza area. So kila elections, kama elections za 2013, ulikuwa unakuta kama Mkikuyu alikuwa naishi Nyanza area na imefika 2013, one year to elections, walikuwa wanaanza kurelocate, wanatafuta a safer place. So kama Mkikuyu alikuwa naishi Nyanza area, ana relocate to Othaya.
Remember, this thing happened and nobody was held responsible. Nobody. So it will be a mistake if you will carry those feelings you had. But otherwise, I think there is an element of cohesion as far as we have reached now, which may be compromised by the political outcomes any time. Can you imagine when I came back here, I found Mama's utensils in somebody's house, but I had just to ignore. In fact, when I came to dig here the first time and I requested somebody to give me a djembe, I was brought that one of mine. I did what I wanted to do and I gave back gave them back their jembe. That's not the only thing. Many things happen. You go into somebody's house, you find something that was very precious for you is there. But then forget it so that you can be able to move ahead.
In terms of justice, hakuna justice imefanyika because unajua saa wakasema ni mambo na justice, ni hao watu wenye walikuwa wamekuja kuchoma, by that time ndio wangekuwa dealt with. But si hao waseo bado wako mtaani, ukipatana nao ukitembea tu unaona by then nilimuona, but hakuna haja tena kurudi ile. Unajua the more you dig in, the more tena things will go bad.
Yani kesi zetu wanaume serikali haiwezi chukulia maanani because wanaona kitu kama hiyo haiwezi fanyika. Haki yangu hiyo bado sijaipata.
The TJRC report was one of the perfect tools that has ever happened in this country, because you see it was talking about truth, justice and reconciliation of the nation of Kenya and for everybody. It was taking statements of people that have been violated since 1963 when we were given independence. And that it had a lot of weight because that was carrying what brings about conflict in this country. We were very grateful for the government that this happened, but then it is very unfortunate because this report has not been implemented up to today.
What we have done in disaster preparedness is to use our pulpit to warn our people that we should not be tracked to ethnic animosity because it tends to benefit the politician, not the wananchi.
Life ya wahalifu haikuwa mzuri sana. Ilifanya tunajaribu kukua rich, lakini wengi wetu walikuwa wanauawa. Wanasiasa pia wanatukomboa, tunaenda tunawafanyia hizo wahalifu zao. Unajua tulikuwa tunafanya kazi pamoja pia na polisi. Wakati sasa kama unataka kuenda kufanya kazi lazima kupatie jambo ya kufanya kazi. Kisa fanya kazi anataka yake.
The border of Kisumu, always there have been problems of conflict between the Nandi and the Luos, and then the Luos and the Kipsigis. The triggers of these conflicts along the borders, first and foremost, is land and boundaries, and then stock theft, which has also been a big trigger.
There have been allegations of politicians fueling and financing this kind of practices. And therefore it becomes a motivation for the youths who are engaged in the practice to continue.
Young people form about 75% of the population. This also means they are the engine of peace and security in the nation. So their participation in the processes is very key. But for many years as a country, we have marginalizing young people. They've always been taken as, beneficiaries of the processes. And that's why you see most of interventions that come from government do not bear fruits in communities.
Kila na wakati tumekuwa tukifanya misururu ya mikutano kuhamasisha jamii kupitia njia ya mediation na reconciliation, na hata na wale watu ambao wameathirika kwa mikasa mbalimbali ni vizuri wafanyiwe trauma healing, kwa sababu hiyo ndio njia ya kuponyesha nchi na kuleta watu pamoja.
To remove these hypocrisies, the memorialization is a very key thing, so that you know whether you did it or you did not do it, nobody is following you. But the message is there. It happened, and because it happened, it should stop. And stop not only now, forever.
Ile vita tuliona hatuwezi taka irudiwe. Ikome na ikome.
Watu wanafaa wakae na peace, mwenye anachaguliwa tunaacha tu afanye kazi yake, lakini si mambo ya kupigana.
Vita sio mzuri.
Useme ni John Mkale ndio upate faida au Mkikuyu ndio upate faida. Hakuna faida. Ni kuumia tu, kupigana na kuumia tu. Hatutaki vita kama hiyo tena. Juu mimi nimeumia, hii sura watu wananitorokea wengine. Watoto wangu sasa wanahangaika. Kulipa school fees ni tabu. Shida ni mingi Kenya. Ningependa kabisa watu ya Kenya hii wasimwage damu tafadhali.
The fintech says that this will help boost funding to bridge the over 3.66 trillion shilling gap between agriculture's contribution to the economy and...
Prior to 2007, the name Kiambaonly
2007 sisi tulikuwa tunafikiria, tuliamuka vile watu wanaamkaga.
Whatever that happened here in Naivas, it was sad. This is around Naivas, where properties were destroyed. That supermarket was brought down by goons. Something that we condone, something that we don't want to see it happening. Kindly protest peaceful. That's what we are praying for. Kindly. We are Kenyans and we need to love one another and support one another. When you're talking about support, kindly, if you ask to maintain life, support us. Support us through the number down there, which is 0700 92 91 71, and God will bless you. God will bless you. Support us. Let me repeat, the number is 0700